So, coming forward now to the beginning of the early stages of the Second World War. Italian failures in the Balkans and North Africa in early 41 spur the German need to think about the Muslim world, to kind of re-engage with this problem that had been kind of rumbling along since the First World War. So, of course, Oppenheim's 1940 memorandum becomes quite handy to them. They start to look at it, take it seriously. And there is a clear realization of the Nazi-Arab alignments around anti-Semitism. So there's as well as the kind of pragmatic stuff, my enemy's enemy is my friend, as we've been talking about in previous episodes, there is here a real ideological alignment between the Nazis and the Arab world. There is also a shared aversion to the idea of the clergy. Nazis obviously have this funny kind of ambivalent relationship with the church. They're not really too keen on the hierarchy, on priests and all the rest of it, but they understand that religion has to kind of take its role.
Well, yeah, they didn't quite go full state-sponsored atheism in the same way as the Soviet Union.
Not like the Soviet Union. But anyway, this works quite well as far as the Arabs are concerned, because imams are much closer to judges and teachers than they are to priests or rabbis, if you like. Hitler is admired by the Arab independence movements for his stance on the Jews, as well as being a real credible threat to their colonial overlords, the British and the French in the Middle East, but also, interestingly, the Soviet Union in Central Asia, which I think is a kind of an element to it that maybe you wouldn't think of when you think of the Muslim world. You don't really think, you think obviously Middle East, North Africa.
Yeah, you don't really consider, well, even within Russia, there's still like a significant Muslim population.
Well, precisely.
In like Chechnya or...
Yeah, and all around Armenia, Azerbaijan, all through the region, Georgia, there's a big Muslim population. Some even see him, some Muslims that is, see him as a Muslim in disguise. Such is his kind of brilliance at tackling all of their enemies at once. So the Germans train Arab militias both to overthrow colonial governments and to present armed resistance to Jewish immigration to Palestine. There's an establishment by the Nazi Foreign Office of an Islamic Central Institute in Berlin to work directly with Arab religious leaders, primarily al-Husseini. Al-Husseini himself, after this increased campaign of violence against the British and the incoming Jewish population, is finally, the British have had enough of him, they exile him in 1937, and he kind of pinballs all around the Middle East for a bit before ending up in Berlin in 1941. Now this is where it gets quite interesting. Hitler receives the Mufti with great pomp. He puts on a fabulous... all the bells and whistles. He's given the real grand treatment, and sits down for a one-on-one. There's a good photo of them. Again, maybe we'll put it up. In which there's a meeting in which he stresses their common enemies. So, the Brits, the Jews, and the Bolsheviks primarily. But interestingly, the Mufti uses this opportunity quite intelligently to say, "Now, Mr. Hitler, this is all very well and good. We agree on lots of things." But what are you going to do about Palestine? Can you give me a guarantee of Palestinian freedom? And Hitler sort of swerves the question, returns to the sort of safer ground of what they have in common. And the Mufti is left without a clear answer. However, he stays in Berlin. He enjoys a lavish lifestyle and a salary, much like our friend Sean Russell from the previous episode. But he's really primarily important as a propaganda tool for the Nazis. So the Nazis see, they have this kind of idea of pan-Islam. So they have this quite simplistic notion of the Muslim world that all Muslims think alike, have the same aims, all the rest of it, which of course is a gross misunderstanding, because like any religion,
people are individual.
Yeah, of course. Well, and also you have the factions, you have the broad factions of Sunni, Shia, all the rest of it. As well as national and tribal identities being overlaid.
There's all different things at play here, really.
Yeah. So they have this kind of slightly simplistic notion, which means that they very much ignore what the Mufti's more about, which is his nationalist aims for Palestine. And they basically use him. They put him on radio as a kind of propaganda tool. All the while he's doing this, he's trying to press his own claims for nationhood, but to no avail. with the help of Himmler, interestingly. So Himmler himself, being a man who is very, very interested in the occult, who is very, very interested in religion, takes more of an interest in the Muslims than does Hitler. I mean, Hitler, as we say, there was a feeling. David Motterdale, in his book Islam and Nazi Germany's War, makes the suggestion that, as I mentioned before, Hitler had been quite admiring of the Muslim troops in the First World War. He nevertheless is not really too keen on them. Of course, they are, again, a Semitic people, like the Jews in Hitler's racial hierarchy. That, of course, does not bode terribly well for them. He even calls the Egyptians decadent, uses the kind of classic Orientalist language, calls the Egyptians decadent in Mein Kampf. But he can sort of get behind Himmler's broad plan. So Himmler focuses in on the zealous mindset of the Arab soldier that makes them seriously fearless fighters. So we see this nowadays in Hamas, in ISIS, this notion, we worship death as you worship life. The 72 virgins in heaven awaiting the glorious martyr, all of this kind of stuff. So Himmler thinks, brilliant, if we can mobilize that feeling, that is cracking stuff. So, despite Hitler's mixed feelings, he nevertheless considers Muslims fully trustworthy for recruitment, especially as the war grinds on, and he feels the need to open up recruitment to non-German troops, divisions, brigades, etc., which he had been very, very strictly against in the early part of the war. There's an interesting comparison to the American Civil War, where the Confederacy is so desperate right at the end of the war in 1865 that they open up recruitment to, extraordinarily, the slaves on the southern plantations, which the idea of giving people who you have brutally oppressed guns to fight on your side when just over the way is freedom if they can turn on you is quite a desperate move indeed. But anyway, Hitler has a much more strategic kind of view and all the rest of it. So he doesn't trust many non-German populations, but the Muslims are one he fully gets behind, and he says, right, we can form brigades, we can give them arms, all the rest of it, they'll be really good fighters for us. So Himmler and al-Husseini, they form two non-German divisions. Within the Waffen-SS, there is a Bosnian Muslim division in the German-controlled NDH, as we said before, the independent, quote-unquote, state of Croatia, which is split into two divisions. The first Croatian, the Handschar, which means scimitar, so the knife, the Arab knife, sword rather, quite right, which is a big division, and a smaller division called the Kama, which is the second Croatian. So the Mufti visits the Balkans to give inflammatory speeches to boost recruitment, boost morale. He doesn't pull his punches in these speeches. He is pretty viciously anti-Semitic. It's all about kill the Jews wherever you may find them, is one of his famous phrases from another speech. So that's the kind of Waffen-SS side, the kind of elite side, if you will. But within the Wehrmacht, you have the Free Arabian Legion, or Arab Volunteers, made up primarily of Iraqi and North African POWs. They receive help not only from the Mufti, but also from the ex-Iraqi Prime Minister al-Gilani, who had fled to Germany after a failed anti-British revolt in 1941. It's intended to facilitate an offensive against the British in the Middle East, but that never materializes. So they are kind of broken up and used instead in North Africa, in the Caucasus, and for anti-partisan actions in Greece and Yugoslavia. Okay. Enter Walter Rauff, the inventor of the gas van execution method in the Holocaust. He, in 1942, is given the task of expanding said Holocaust to North Africa. There are 94,000 Jews in Libya at this point. So you can just imagine, had Rommel continued to flounce Monty and Patton in the desert, we would have been looking at a whole new front, horrifying front on the Holocaust. But thankfully, Rommel is stymied, and that puts paid to that, I should say.